Hello, I'm Scott Thompson, and welcome to After 10. The Pope has touched down in Korea. For a closer look at the man we now know as Pope Francis and a closer look at what to expect from his time here, we are joined today on the show by journalist and author Cristian Martini Grimaldi. Mr. Martini Grimaldi, thank you very much for being on the program.
Thank you for having me here.
Now let's begin with your connection to Pope Francis. You've written a book entitled I Was Bergoglio, I Am Francis. It was, I believe, released here in Korea just this week. Tell us how you came to write it.
It all starts with a phone call from my director on the very day of his election. That was the 13th of March, 2013. And what happens is that I just fly all the way to Buenos Aires to find out who this man was, because nobody back then knew about him. It was not even in the list of the Vaticanists who usually suggest names that could, become Pope during the conclave. He was not even on the list of those possible Pope. So nobody really knew much about him. And so I went there and I explored the territory where he operated as a cardinal, but as a bishop before, a bishop of Buenos Aires. And I found out a very troubled social reality there. Argentina is a country that can feed 300 million people, but it actually has very large areas of absolute poverty. You have street crimes as a very common phenomenon. Even in the most popular districts, the most rich districts. And you have this drug called Paco, which is derived from coke. It's bad drugs it's really cheap drugs, which makes it even worse because then the poor people get addicted on it. So I went there and I interviewed and I met priests, those priests who help these young people, young addicts to this drug, to recover. And Pope Francis happened to be one of the moral and financial support of these programs. And not only that, he made his presence felt on those areas. We're talking about the suburban areas of Buenos Aires, the so-called slums. So if you walk in those areas, you really have to leave everything behind that you have of any worth, even your cell phone. So it's that kind of a edge, and so Bergoglio lived and formed himself through this practice, through this experience. So he's really a pope on the streets. He really likes to be among these people. He said it many times. He lacks the close relation with people. He has to touch people physically. Well, he really doesn't feel any good anymore. He actually said he feels sick if he doesn't do that. So he has to keep being close to people, because that's the old Bergoglio. What the old Bergoglio used to do, or the younger Bergoglio, was really that, being close to the poor, being close to and try to help as much as he could.
In writing this book, so much has been written about Pope Francis in the year or more since he was elected. What is something that you learned that maybe surprised you and maybe might surprise us about him?
This book that I wrote is a lot of interviews of people who known him possibly for many years. Many of them met him, they really lived and worked with him for many years. Well, one thing you learn is, for example, I have this one interview and of this actually a Greek teacher, And he told me, well, you know, one day Bergoglio, he drove 400 kilometers to this town called Rio de la Plata, which is very far from Buenos Aires, because there was this priest who was sick. It was in bed, and you know, just for the sake of being close to him, so to help his recovery somehow. And he drove by, you know, with his car, you know, and he was a bishop at that time. It wasn't just, you know, ordinary priest. Other people told me that, for example, this Father Benjamin, who also known him in the 60s, late in the 60s, and he told me once in 2006, there is this big march of youth march in 2006. It's called to Lujan. It's a procession of young people, and they all meet in this place. And he was telling me, Father Benjamin was telling me how they went on with Bergoglio confessing people all night, and this went on and on until 4 in the morning. And then they took a break, had their coffee, their mate, whatever, and then he said to me, well, you know, I was really that tired. But Bergoglio kept going on and confessing these young people the whole night. And even more shocking is that he kind of was in disguise doing this because he was already a cardinal, but nobody knew. So because he passed for a normal priest, he was dressed as a normal priest. Sure. So this is very impressive.
You've actually had a chance, I believe, to meet
Yes.
Pope Francis
Yes.
one time. Tell us about that experience.
Well, he has a really great sense of humor. For example, like you can tell him by the way he uses his words, the way he plays with words. He was saying, for example, one of his homily, something really, I think, really funny. He was saying, you know, there's a smoothie, there's the apple smoothie, there's the orange smoothie, and then you got the smoothie of faith. So what is the smoothie of faith? Well, you know, when you put a little Jesus Christ, a little Virgin Mary, a little bit of that, a little bit of that, and then you got this, you know, but you can't drink the smoothie on the rocks. I mean, it's like, you know, the faith on the rocks doesn't really work, you know, meaning like, you know, you can't just apply some ingredients and then you got your faith. You know, can't just stick to some ingredients. That's not what faith and spirituality is about. He really has really good connections with young people. That's something you really appreciate. The Pope spoke, I think even not too long ago, about the Jonah syndrome. What's the Jonah syndrome? Well, that's someone who wants his faith to be good looking, to look beautiful in outside. So it's not a, you know, very truthful and form of faith. And as a matter of fact, there's an anecdote that goes back a few months ago. What happened in Italy, in Rome, when he convened in Santa Marta, which is this small church inside the Vatican, the whole head of the Italian political leadership. He convened them all there in Santa Marta. I have to mention there was 6 in the morning, so everybody was half asleep, you know, and they were waiting for the Pope to give him like a warm, nice welcome. But instead they got a very loud spank. So what he did, he looked the Italian leadership in the eyes and then told them straight in their face, you are like whitewashed tombs. Meaning, see, you know, you dress well, you smell good, you know, you actually look beautiful, but that's in the outside. In the inside, you are rotten.
He said this to their faces.
He says this to their faces.
Okay.
Well, that was the whole, you know, the meaning of the other phrases. But that it really was a strong statement that he made there, and so people realize this is not a pope that likes to caress, you know, especially the higher authorities. No, he goes strong and straight to the point. You know, when he has to speak, he speaks, you know, very strongly. And that's one of the things that were mentioned, but to me, a year before by people that I interviewed. I said, look, you know, this Pope, you know, he looks really, you know, peaceful. He's really, but you know, when he wants to say something, he wants to be understood. He will raise his voice, you know, and we have people hear him, you know.
And then taking a more modern view, perhaps, of why Pope Francis chose to visit Korea here. What reason can you give us there?
Sure. One of the things I actually wrote about this on a New Canon article, and I mentioned the fact the history of Argentina back when Bergoglio was a provincial of Buenos Aires the Jesuits in Argentina back in the 70s. well, there was let's say a very troubled political time. There was a dictatorship back then. And the priests and the Jesuits were the most at risk for their lives. And that's because they were the ones who were speaking about freedom in a time when there was no freedom. And if you look at the history of Korea in the 70s, you kind of have the same situation, because you're going to see like a dictatorship, and then you're going to see that although a minority, the Catholic Church did operate as an opposition, a political opposition in this country. And as a matter of fact, it was a prolonged, non-violent, but nonetheless very strong opposition. The church in this country gave a voice of resistance in defense of human rights and freedom. So that parallel, I think, should be taken into consideration when we look at the reasons why Pope Francis chose Korea.
You think that's something that he has thought about?
I'm sure he did. I mean, he's very knowledgeable, so he lived those times.
Sure.
And those were hard times. One of the heroes of this country, was the Cardinal Kim, and we know why he was looked at as a hero. As a matter of fact, for those reasons, because they spoke of freedom on a time when there wasn't.
In terms of this visit here, this papal visit, the theme here, the slogan is "Arise, Shine," which is from Isaiah verse 60, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. What can you tell us about that choice? Why was that chosen as the slogan?
Well, I think because he always spoke about opening and going out. He always has urged people to go out and not stay. One of his Spanish quotes was, I think it was like, no podemos quedarnos en la parroquia y en el colegio, catequista a la calle, a catequizar, a buscar puertas, a golpear corazones. What it means is that he's urging people inside the perimeter of the church and the parishes to go out. Because what he says is that we can't wait for faithful to come to church. We have to go and knock on their doors. Right. He actually says that, knock on their doors, knock on their hearts, and that's how you do the pastoral work. You can just wait there. And so his message is always about opening and going out. He mentioned even lately, he says the church, if the church is like stagnant water, it will die eventually, and it will get corrupted. So one of his other quotes is, he says that the church, it's better a church that has an accident, because it takes the risk to go out, than a church that is sick because it's always, inside, locked up in a room.
Right. There is speculation that he may meet with victims of Japanese colonialism, the former sex slaves, while he's here. He has invited, in fact, victims of the ferry disaster from April to a mass as well. Both groups of people who have suffered in immeasurable ways, of course. This very much speaks to the type of Pope that he has been, right, over the last year and a half or so.
Sure, it just reflects, yes, exactly the type of Pope, type of things he does, actually. They became very famous and very notorious, his phone calls. Well, who does he call? Well, he calls like women who are victims of physical abuse, because people who are victims of financial trouble. He's been meeting the victims of the mafia in Italy. Right. And so, he also spoke strongly against mafia just lately. So he's very close to the victims. As a matter of fact, one of his first visits here in Korea will be Kaotongne. That is this community, it's a congregation, it's also a community where they take care of sick, abandoned people. I've been there. I've seen this abandoned people, abandoned by families because they have some physical handicap or mental. He's going there because he wants to be close to these people. It's always been one of his, like we all remember like what happened after his election, the first Holy Thursday. This has also been on the news a little bit. I mean, we might have forgotten now, but it's first Holy Thursday. The usual tradition is you have a mass in the San Giovanni Cathedral in Rome. What he did instead was to go to juveniles, to wash feet of juveniles in a detention center in Rome. And that was kind of like an exception to an established tradition, but it was no exception to him. Actually, for him was a common thing. He had done this before So much so that in this book, actually, there are pictures of him the year before the election when he's actually washing feet to juveniles who are the victims of the drugs, as I mentioned before, little petty criminals, really the lowest, the people, the poorest people, you know, those who've been unlucky in life. And there was also a bit of aroused a bit of concern and amazement, the fact that one of these people he washed feet to was a woman, and was also a Muslim woman, happened to be.
Right.
And there were people, you know, asking how does a woman and a Muslim woman impersonate one of the 12 apostles from the Last Supper? Just to say that, you know, this Pope reaches down to people and reaches out to people regardless of their religious beliefs and their condition as well.
During his time here in Korea, do you expect there to be some sort of message maybe for North Korea? Peace and reconciliation has been a key theme to his visit here.
I think, see, I was talking about this with a friend of mine, who's Vincenzo Bordo. He's a man who spent 25 years in Korea helping the homeless and the poor. And we're talking about, he was saying like, well, yeah, but this is a pastoral visit. That's not a political visit, you know? Sure. It's always like the media spin that makes it into some political meaning. I mean, that's the job of the media, it's understandable. Sure. But no, he really wants to be close to people. And then if his messages, his spiritual messages, inspire some political action, then that's even, you know, it's welcome. Right. You know, cannot welcome that. But that's not his main purpose, for sure.
This, again, also has been a very key point of his time as Pope, right? Reaching out to the youth, especially through social media. Tell us a little bit about his efforts there.
Sure. See, the Pope, it's a simple thought. If you don't have the young people, if you don't nurture them with the right value, what kind of church you're going to have in the future? So you have to start from them. And he repeated many times, he urged people, the young people, to go out to fight for their rights, literally. And he always told them, don't be at the tail of history, but play forward, play an attack. And he also said things like, you know, don't look life from the balcony. As Jesus wasn't, he was immersed in life, and saying, urging young people to immerse in life. Don't just play outside. But he also has warnings for young people, not just, you know, doesn't always just urges them to go out and fight for their rights. But for example, one of the warnings is that he said this thing in Spanish that donde está la verdad está la luz, pero no la confunda con el flash, which means where's the truth, where's the light, there's the truth, but don't mistake that for the flashlight. You know, so meaning like, especially nowadays in this culture of makeup and surgeries, and you know, I mean, it's like saying, okay, go to the fundamental, keep in mind the fundamentals, but you know, don't just be, you know, too taken by the exterior appearances. That's another message, you know. And it's really like, you know, cautious message, as well as in the media. See, he uses a big word, but you know, he has people using Twitter for him, say this way, and because it's, you know, he understands that's the way people communicate nowadays. So, and he's perfectly in tune with today's communication modes. But again, also there, especially in the last, there was this instrumental libraries, which are not the Pope words, but it's the work and preparation work for the next synod. Well, there is mentioned, you know, the warnings of this new media, of the overusing, abusing the smartphones or social networks, because where is the danger there? Well, the danger could be, for example, his quote, actually, the Bergoglio quote, when he said that television even can break up the unity of a family, inside a family. Because, you know, if you, as the same way as a social network can do, if you're in a table sharing a meal, and then you know, you got 3 people sharing pictures on Facebook, that's not really sharing the meal.
Quality time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Also, so, you know, he also kind of warns them, you know, but he's in tune. I mean, he does appreciate the new communication media, even though it is kind of cautious.
This may be a hard question to answer, perhaps, but what are are you expecting, or what message, I guess, do you hope that he delivers during his time here to the people?
Yeah, again, I think I will hope. See, I spoke to different people here, Jesuits, priests, and what I can summarize a little bit is that maybe there's a bit too much of a focus on the numbers of the church. You know, we hear about speaking about like in 5 years they want to reach 20 million more faithful, more Catholics. Again, it's a very ambitious goal, but it's appreciated. Ambition is, I think, it's one of those things you should appreciate. It means you have a positive attitude towards the future. But again, if that doesn't go with the quality of the faithful, then you have a problem.
Sure.
So when I was talking to the missionaries and other Jesuits, and I was told, well, you know, well, it's something everybody can realize just by walking inside a church nowadays in Korea, that there's a social level, it's kind of upper middle class. And then you have a situation where if the faithful can no longer pay his tithe to the parish, well, you rather leave the church instead of going on and bearing the shame of being non-compliant. And so this is a situation that should be looked at. And also the fact, if you don't have the right dress, you feel uncomfortable, that means that you really living out, the lower class of the people. So there should be something, maybe through catechism, that means something should be done in order to reach down to this. I mean, if you really want to increase the numbers, you can't go any higher because the people are going to be less and less. So the more people are in the lower scales out there. So this is, I hope his messages will be inspiring in this sense.
We'll certainly be looking forward to all of the messages that Pope Francis has over the coming days during his trip here to Korea, as well as your coverage of it. We encourage everybody, of course, to go out and pick up your book, I Was Bergoglio, I Am Francis. Mr. Martini Grimaldi, thank you very much for being on the program. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank you, as always, for watching. We'll see you next time, After 10.
We will continue to do our best to improve our show based on the perspective of our viewers. Always feel free to leave us any comments, great ideas, or suggestions you wish to share with us.